April 1945. The Reich was collapsing, and yet a single convoy, shielded by the last loyal SS units, moved south out of Prague under cover of night. Allied aircraft circling above caught only fragments, headlights darting through forest roads, a column of armoured trucks bearing no unit insignia. What they carried was unknown, listed in intercepted transmissions as AE-12. When dawn broke, the convoy had vanished. No wreckage, no bodies, no trace. For decades, its existence was denied, buried in restricted archives under Operation Eclipse. Only one truth remains. Whatever those men were transporting, someone ensured it would never reach Allied hands. Chapter 1. Operation Eclipse, the Vanishing Convoy. In the final week of April 1945, the war in Europe had become a chaos of retreat and ruin. The German command structure had fractured beyond repair. Entire divisions melted away as the Red Army advanced through the east, while the Western Allies closed in from the west. Amid the confusion, a classified order was issued from an SS command post in Prague, marked Geheime Reichssache, top secret state matter. It authorized a high-priority evacuation of special cargo from the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia to an undisclosed Alpine destination. The convoy was to move under the protection of SS Obersturmbannführer Erich Kruger, a logistics officer known for his discretion and brutality. The operation was coded Eclipse, and the manifest listed only one cryptic entry, AE-12, vorrangig für Sicherheitszwecke. The column left Prague on the evening of April 28th. Eyewitnesses in nearby villages described 8 trucks, 2 half-tracks, and a radio van bearing Reichsadler insignia stripped of identification numbers. Civilian onlookers recalled a distinct metallic odour trailing behind the convoy, and guards wearing full chemical filtration masks despite the clear weather. The route followed the Vltava River south, avoiding major roads. Allied reconnaissance pilots later confirmed seeing what appeared to be vehicles using blackout lights and travelling in tight formation, an unusual precision for retreating German forces. Intercepted Enigma traffic. From that night referenced Eclipse priority, transit and a request for air cover, denied due to Luftwaffe shortages. A decoded fragment from a Luftnachrichtenstelle air signal station in Linz carried a single alarming phrase: cargo volatility unverified, containment unstable. The message was forwarded to Schaf intelligence, but redacted beyond recognition by the time it reached the Allied Review Board. No follow-up investigation was authorized. By May 2nd, the war in Europe was effectively over, yet the convoy was never reported destroyed, captured, or accounted for. When US Third Army units swept through southern Bohemia, they discovered abandoned vehicles, scorched papers, and SS insignia dumped into rivers, but nothing resembling the AE-12 column. Only a burnt road map found near Český Krumlov offered a clue. A penciled circle over the Šumava forest, and the words E3 shelter confirmed. Years later, a surviving Wehrmacht engineer, interrogated at a British internment camp, claimed to have seen a sealed container train leaving Prague under SS escort. He described lead-lined crates, unusual magnetometers, and men referring to the American device in nervous whispers. His testimony was dismissed as fabrication. The term American device seemed absurd in 1945 Europe, but a single typed sheet preserved in MI6 archives, dated April 30th, 1945, hinted otherwise. It referenced AE-12, Manhattan correlation probable. The paper was stamped most secret, not for foreign release. For nearly half a century, Operation Eclipse remained buried under layers of conflicting reports. Soviet archives listed the event as a logistical deception by retreating Germans. American intelligence classified it under strategic artifact transfers, a catch-all for unsolved wartime recoveries. No official investigation reached public view until 1989, when the Iron Curtain fell and fragments of forgotten war surfaced once more. That summer, a Czech forestry team clearing post-war munitions near the Šumava border stumbled upon an unnatural mound of earth. Beneath it lay the corroded shell of an Stakayevze, 251 half-track, its markings eroded beyond recognition. Inside were the remains of 5 SS personnel still seated at their stations, their weapons unfired. Next to the driver's compartment was a deformed Geiger counter fused into its casing, its dial frozen in the red. Further excavation uncovered a massive steel crate, walls several inches thick, welded shut. The outer surface bore traces of extreme heat, as if it had been exposed to a furnace. All inscriptions had been destroyed, except for one faintly visible line stamped in English, not German. Property of Manhattan Engineering District. The discovery triggered a quiet intervention. Within 48 hours, the Czech government cordoned off the site under the supervision of US military observers from Ramstein Air Base. The crate was airlifted away aboard a C-141 transport aircraft, destination undisclosed. Officially, the artifact was described as contaminated ordnance. Locals were ordered to silence under penalties of national security violations. Within months, all documentation of the find vanished from public archives. Declassified Czech police logs, however, provide glimpses of what was seen before removal. One officer noted a persistent humming emanating from within the crate and a pulsing luminescence leaking from a fissure in the steel. Radiation teams recorded elevated readings extending several meters from the object, levels consistent with unshielded isotopes. Yet none of the materials recovered matched any known German reactor technology. An internal memorandum filed by a visiting American technician contained the line, "If this is theirs, they got here first." In 1992, an Austrian historian named Dr. Lucas Reinhardt obtained fragments of SS personnel rosters mentioning Eclipse transport unit, assigned Prague sector. Among the names listed was Erich Kruger, declared missing in action May 1945. Reinhardt's request to access classified Allied files concerning Operation Eclipse was denied under US Executive Order 112356. He continued his research independently, traveling through Czech border towns and interviewing surviving witnesses. Several locals recounted being awakened by earth tremors and lights the night the convoy disappeared. One elderly farmer described a roar like engines underground, then silence. In 1995, Reinhardt vanished while hiking near the Šumava forest. His notebook was later found in a railway station locker in Linz. The final entry read simply, AE-12, not German. Tracked source to 1943, British liaison in Bern. Crossref, Manhattan. Kruger, not dead. The Czech government continues to deny that any US operation occurred on its soil that year. When journalists inquired about the removal of the half-track and its cargo, officials cited routine clearance of wartime debris. The coordinates of the excavation were sealed and the site reforested. Satellite imaging from the late 1990s, however, revealed a cleared rectangular area approximately 20 meters across, consistent with an excavation pit refilled by heavy machinery. In 2008, a Freedom of Information request in the United States revealed a redacted Defense Threat Reduction Agency report titled Subject AE-12 Bohemia Recovery, 1989. The document referenced containment breach during transport and reclassification under Project ECHO. The final page bore an advisory recommending total site sterilization and concluded with a chilling note. Eclipse materials demonstrate signatures identical to early Hanford emissions, yet predate the Trinity test by 20 months. If true, the implications of Operation Eclipse reach far beyond wartime desperation or plunder. It suggests that, amid the chaos of Germany's collapse, an SS logistics column carried evidence, or remnants, of technology no nation officially possessed in 1945. Whether it was experimental nuclear material, captured Allied research, or something more obscure, remains speculative. What is certain is that both sides of the Iron Curtain invested decades in suppressing every trace of it. The forest has since reclaimed the site. Only a faint depression in the earth marks where the convoy met its silent end. Yet local hikers still report anomalies, compasses that spin uncontrollably, birds avoiding a precise clearing, and faint static interference on radios when the wind shifts east. The Czech military continues to deny any residual contamination, though restricted airspace remains in place. Operation Eclipse remains unsolved. Its final cargo vanished into classified obscurity. But among declassified Allied intercepts, one forgotten line stands out. A transmission from an American monitoring post in Bavaria, dated May 3, 1945. Unidentified vehicle column lost from radar near Bohemia border. Final signal strength consistent with atmospheric ionization. Recommends silence. Chapter 2. The Cold Files of Unit 400. When Soviet engineers entered the ruins of Königsberg in 1946, They expected rubble and corpses. What they found beneath the bombed-out cellars of the Reich's eastern bastion would be locked away for the next 50 years. Records show the discovery was logged as Technical Complex 12B, a network of reinforced chambers hidden beneath the old university district. The air was stale and heavy with chemical residue. Inside, the engineers uncovered hundreds of glass cylinders, reels of microfilm sealed in oil canisters, and a black ledger embossed with the insignia of the Ahnenerbe, Heinrich Himmler's occult research division. Yet the labels inside bore no mention of mythology or anthropology. They read simply, Einheit 400 O's. The designation had never appeared in any captured German documents. Soviet analysts assumed it was a code name for one of the Reich's advanced weapons programs. But the files inside the vault suggested something far stranger. Long-term experiments in human endurance, electromagnetic exposure, and atmospheric manipulation. One folder bore the title Project Nebelkrone, Project Mist Crown. The accompanying film strip, spliced from nitrate stock, depicted men in military uniforms standing in open fields as towers emitted arcs of electricity above them. The caption, translated from German, read, Testing Cognitive Resilience to Induced Resonance Fields. The Soviets confiscated every item and classified the operation under Object D7. The documents were transported to the Ural city of Sverdlovsk in 1947, to a newly established research site overseen by the Ministry for State Security. The team was placed under Colonel Yuri Malenkov, a physicist turned intelligence officer. His directive, preserved in a partially declassified memorandum, was explicit. Replicate the German findings. Determine feasibility for behavioral influence through electromagnetic means. The order came directly from Beria's office. What began as a simple recovery effort became one of the earliest Soviet programs in cognitive warfare. Witness accounts from surviving technicians interviewed after the Soviet collapse describe an atmosphere of paranoia and secrecy. They claimed the materials from Königsberg arrived in sealed crates, accompanied by guards who never spoke Russian. The microfilms were copied and locked in separate safes marked with chemical hazard symbols. Inside the reels, diagrams showed oscillation patterns mapped against EEG charts, annotated in both German and broken Russian. The names Dr. J. Fuchs and Professor Holder appeared repeatedly, though no records of such individuals exist in German academic archives. One reel carried a warning scrawled in pencil. Prolonged exposure beyond 0.2 Tesla. Irreversible. By 1952, Object D71 had expanded into a closed, scientific city codenamed Polygon 400, reports suggest that the Soviet Union began testing low-frequency transmission arrays similar to what would later be used in over-the-horizon radar. Several engineers noted that the technology mirrored the Nebelkrone schematics almost exactly. A declassified GRU memo, dated February 1953, describes psychophysical interference in animal subjects exposed to pulse modulation. The next paragraph is fully redacted. The final line reads only, results promising, ethical implications severe. Then, in March 1958, Polygon 400 was erased in a single night. A massive explosion leveled the facility. The official explanation cited a methane gas detonation, though satellite imaging, reviewed decades later, shows the pattern of a directed blast, not an accident. No survivors were recorded. The death toll was estimated at over 200. Soviet internal correspondence classified the event as Incident D7 terminated. The term Einheit 400 vanished from all subsequent scientific documentation. Yet the story did not end there. In 1962, a captured GRU officer under CIA interrogation in West Berlin mentioned residual effects of D7 technology. His debriefing transcript, stored under CIA file Blue Haven 62-1117, includes the phrase, echo effects continue. Field persists even after termination. When pressed for details, the officer refused to elaborate, claiming he would lose his coherence if he did. The interview ended abruptly. Within 24 hours, he was found dead in his cell from what was ruled a cerebral aneurysm. In 1970, British intelligence analysts reviewing defected Soviet data came across references to cognitive destabilization among radio technicians stationed near Sverdlovsk. Symptoms included auditory hallucinations, disorientation, and memory fragmentation. The analysts concluded it might be exposure to electromagnetic frequencies, but the peculiar coincidence was the frequency range. matching the same modulation as the Nebelkrone towers from the recovered German film. When the USSR dissolved, fragments of Object D71 surfaced in the chaos of declassification. One of the microfilm reels, labeled 400x13B, appeared at an auction in Warsaw in 1993, purchased anonymously by a Western collector. Experts analyzing the film found frames depicting human subjects with electrodes affixed to their temples, staring blankly into a beam of light. A timecode in the corner indicated 1944-07-19. Radiation analysis of the film stock revealed exposure inconsistent with conventional lighting, closer to X-ray emission. Subsequent frames showed the same individuals immobile, eyes open, with faint condensation visible on their lips, as if breathing. Attempts to trace the reel's origin failed. The collector later reported strange interference patterns appearing on televisions in his home whenever the film canister was nearby. He donated it to a private institute in Geneva in 1998. Within months, the institute's archives burned in an unexplained fire. To this day, no official Soviet or German document explains what Unit 400 truly was. Theories range from advanced psychology to early electromagnetic weapons development. Some historians believe it may have been an Ahnenerbe front for scientific exploitation, combining occult belief with experimental science. Others suspect it was a post-war Soviet fabrication intended to frighten Western intelligence. But certain details defy coincidence. The recovered Königsberg ledger includes a line written in German cursive. The field endures beyond structure, it remembers. The same phrasing appears translated into Russian in a GRU report from 1954. When linguists compared the handwriting, they found them identical, written apparently by the same hand, a decade apart. The last known reference to Unit 400 surfaced in a 1978 KGB memorandum addressed to the Ministry of Health. It requested funding for research into field resonance cognition, referencing prior German results, CD7. The note was signed not by a scientist, but by a colonel in military intelligence. The project was approved in 2003, following the partial opening of Soviet archives. A classified inventory titled Recovered German Scientific Materials, 1945-1959, listed Einheit 400, 412 reels missing. The file remains inaccessible to the public. Königsberg's ruins were rebuilt long ago as Kaliningrad, yet local folklore still recalls the buzzing vault unearthed after the war. Older residents speak of a constant hum that once filled the tunnels until Soviet engineers sealed them. Geologists conducting surveys in 2012 recorded faint electromagnetic disturbances, localized exactly beneath the coordinates of the old university basements, frequencies oscillating in the same range as the Nebelkrone records. Whether the hum is a geological anomaly or something older, something engineered, no one has determined. But every few years, the instruments spike, exactly on July 19th, the same date inscribed on the surviving Unit 400 film strip. Whatever the Soviets buried beneath Kaliningrad may no longer exist, but the field, as one anonymous GRU annotation stated, does not require human maintenance. It sustains itself. Chapter 3. Operation Deep Current, the Baltic Ghost Fleet. In the summer of 1945, British naval intelligence began intercepting strange maritime reports off the Polish coast. Fishermen from Hel Peninsula described seeing sleek, dark vessels gliding under moonlight, long after Germany's formal surrender. The Royal Navy assumed these were fleeing U-boats attempting to reach Norway or Argentina. Yet when patrols were sent, radar returned nothing. What the locals called Die Geisterboote, the ghost boats, seemed to appear and vanish at will. Declassified files from the Admiralty's Operational Intelligence Center reveal that between May and August 1945, at least 11 sonar contacts were recorded in the Baltic, all matching the acoustic signature of Type WWII submarines, the most advanced German U-boat model, capable of silent running. These subs were believed destroyed or captured, yet the contact patterns indicated an organized formation, traveling in perfect alignment, 3 nautical miles apart, following a grid pattern mapped between Bornholm and Gdansk Bay. The operation to investigate was designated Deep Current. Rear Admiral Geoffrey S. Miles, head of the Royal Navy's Baltic Division, authorized the dispatch of 2 frigates and multiple reconnaissance aircraft. The official mission statement read, Objective: to locate and secure any remaining Kriegsmarine naval assets operating autonomously. Intelligence analysts believed remnants of the German Navy were executing a prearranged evacuation to a secret destination. Coded messages intercepted from an abandoned radio post in Kiel contained repeated references to Sector, Grey 3 and Phase Omega. Analysts noted that Omega had been used as a term for final stage self-destruction in several SS and U-boat directives. The first major encounter occurred on June 9, 1945, when HMS Viking detected multiple submerged echoes 200 meters deep, stationary, forming a precise rectangle. Depth charges were deployed. The result was silence. No debris surfaced, no oil slick, no sign of life. Naval records show that sonar operators reported hearing faint rhythmic tapping, spaced at 88-second intervals. The pattern repeated 4 times before ceasing. It was recorded on magnetic tape and filed as Exhibit DC-071. Experts later determined the intervals matched standard Morse spacing, though the message, 3 letters, HEL, was never fully transmitted. For years, Operation Deep Current remained an unresolved footnote in Allied naval logs. Post-war intelligence debriefs from captured German officers offered little clarity. Several Kriegsmarine veterans spoke of a final mission called Sea Schlange, the Sea Serpent, a plan to evacuate sensitive materials and personnel from Danzig before Soviet occupation. Yet none could identify the fleet's commander or destination. One former signals officer claimed the fleet received non-standard orders from Berlin days after Hitler's death, signed by someone using the initials EK, possibly Admiral Karl Dönitz himself, though the initials do not match. The Cold War buried the mystery under new hostilities. In 1952, Soviet naval trawlers near the same coordinates reported interference with sonar systems, describing fields of static distortion. The Soviet Navy dispatched 2 recovery submarines, S-243 and S-248, as part of an operation codenamed Typhoon Dawn. Both vessels were lost. Debriefed survivors from accompanying surface ships reported witnessing bubbles and white flashes beneath the waterline. Moscow declared the incident classified and ceased further dives in the area. The British, however, never forgot. In 1974, NATO launched a covert joint mission using experimental sonar mapping. The scans revealed something impossible: a cluster of metallic shapes resting at the seafloor in symmetrical formation. 15 hulls, perfectly preserved. Analysts noted the grid spacing was exact to within centimeters. The objects emitted faint electromagnetic signatures, inconsistent with typical maritime wrecks. The recovered sonar maps were archived under NATO Deep Current 74 Class 5 SIM and remain partially censored. Declassified meeting notes from 1975 record a chilling discussion. A US admiral asked, "Could they still be powered?" A Royal Navy scientist replied, "No conventional battery could last 30 years, unless the vessels were designed for long-term preservation." The file concludes, objects to be left undisturbed until further analysis. Polish authorities became aware of the NATO activity decades later. In 1998, a joint German-Polish expedition sought to verify the claims. Using a civilian research vessel, they located a periscope protruding from the silt 210 meters below. The object was retrieved and examined at the Gdynia Naval Museum. Despite being submerged for over 50 years, the optics and bearings were in near-perfect condition. More disturbing was a small analog timer mechanism within the periscope assembly, still operational, counting down. Its dial showed 53 years, 7 months and 14 days since initiation. It reached 0 at midnight local time on November 23, 1998. At that exact hour, seismic instruments along the Baltic coast registered a low-frequency tremor lasting 47 seconds. No earthquake was recorded elsewhere. The tremor originated precisely at the coordinates of the Ghost Fleet grid. Following the event, all German participation in the recovery effort ceased. Polish naval officers involved in the expedition were reassigned, and the periscope was quietly confiscated by NATO personnel. A subsequent statement from the Polish Ministry of Defense referred to routine removal of hazardous ordnance. Unofficially, researchers reported that several divers who handled the artifact experienced disorientation and temporary auditory loss. One diver described hearing metallic knocking, like someone signaling from deep below. In 2004, a leaked US Navy document titled Special Oceanographic Survey 13B referenced anomalous metallic structures off Bornholm, resembling WWII-era Type 21 hulls exhibiting magnetic fields of unknown origin. The report noted the fields seemed self-sustaining, with no apparent power source. One paragraph, later redacted reportedly, speculated that the fleet may have been part of an automated preservation experiment employing polarized hull plating. The final page contained a brief handwritten note. If these are vessels, they were not abandoned. They were arranged. Civilian sonar operators continue to detect the formation. In 2013, high-resolution scans confirmed 15 objects arranged in a perfect grid, each roughly 70 meters long. No wreckage or human remains have ever been recovered. Water around the site exhibits unusual conductivity, disrupting most modern sonar. Divers report abrupt drops in temperature and compass drift exceeding 10 degrees. The Baltic Sea remains a graveyard of lost wars, but none are like this. What purpose did these submarines serve? Some historians argue they were part of Project Eisenwind, an unconfirmed German attempt to create an underwater transmission network for long-range communication. Others suggest they carried classified cargo, scientific or human, that was never meant to surface. A minority whisper that the hulls were decoys, floating batteries meant to hide something deeper beneath them. Whatever truth hides below, governments on both sides of the former Iron Curtain have agreed on one thing: the coordinates are off limits. In 2018, a Polish naval research vessel approaching the area was ordered to turn. Backed by a NATO radio signal using outdated encryption from the 1970s, the operator confirmed the code was valid, though no one could identify who transmitted it, and so, beneath the cold Baltic waters, 15 silent shapes remain. No light reaches them, no diver dares disturb them. Only the steady pulse of sonar, returning faint echoes, reminds the world that they are still there, waiting, aligned, and impossibly preserved. To this day, Naval Records file Operation Deep Current under inconclusive. But on the unmarked tapes archived in Portsmouth, one final sonar ping, recorded on June 9, 1945, still plays clearly. It repeats 3 tones, then a pause, then a final pattern unmistakable to any Morse-trained ear. HEL. Chapter 4. Project Ashfall, the missing Reichsbank train. By the spring of 1945, the Reich was disintegrating. The Red Army closed in from the east, Allied bombers owned the skies, and Berlin burned. Yet even in its dying days, the Nazi hierarchy maintained an obsessive commitment to secrecy and salvage. Somewhere within this chaos, an armoured train designated Reichsbank Transport 977 departed from Breslau on April 22nd, under orders from the Ministry of Economics. Officially, it was carrying bullion and archives for relocation to the Alps. Unofficially, it held something classified as Stufe Grau, or grey level, a term used only for SS technical assets of highest secrecy. The convoy consisted of 12 carriages reinforced with composite armour plating, 2 flak wagons, and a locomotive retrofitted with diesel-electric drives, unusual for the time. Documents later found in a destroyed rail depot in Wrocław confirmed that its cargo manifest included specimens, biological and containment vessels, chemical. The train's route was to follow the Silesian network west, pass through Wałbrzych, and then disappear into a series of underground depots connected to Project Ries, the giant complex, a network of tunnels the Germans had been carving into the Owl Mountains since 1943. These caverns, lined with concrete and steel, were said to be built for advanced weapons research or refuge for Nazi leadership. No record of their completion exists. The last confirmed sighting of Train 977 came from a Polish rail worker in Świebodzice, who reported it passing at dawn, sealed tight, escorted by SS guards. He remembered one strange detail. The carriages emitted a faint vibration, as if running machinery operated inside. 2 days later, Soviet forces captured Breslau. The train had vanished. For years, stories of the gold train circulated as post-war rumor. Treasure hunters and journalists pursued tales of Nazi riches hidden beneath the Silesian hills. Yet buried beneath the myth was a classified file locked in Soviet archives. Project Ashfall. According to partial declassification in 1991, Ashfall was a recovery operation launched by Soviet engineering battalions in late 1945, seeking evidence of German chemical warfare projects. The file references seismic anomalies detected near the Ries tunnels, accompanied by reports of non-explosive subterranean detonation. Field teams attempting entry were said to have suffered from acute radiation sickness, an impossibility, given that no known radiological weapons existed in the area. Their reports were sealed under nuclear contamination, unconfirmed. In 1953, British intelligence intercepted an East German transmission labelled Dossier Ashfall, Soviet Control. The content was brief but chilling. Geological samples indicate sustained heat within tunnel strata. No blast crater. Recommend continued observation. Possible containment reaction. Analysts could not reconcile heat within rock without detonation. The British report was classified and forgotten until declassification in 2008, but the local legends persisted. In the 1980s, Polish miners digging near Baltic encountered reinforced concrete tunnels unlisted on any survey. They described air thick with metallic dust and an oppressive humming that seemed to vibrate through their helmets. One foreman recounted seeing frozen patterns of light embedded in the tunnel walls, like glass veins. Soon after, the site was abruptly closed by military police under pretense of subsidence risk. None of the miners were permitted to return. In 2016, as interest in the supposed Nazi gold train revived worldwide, a team of geophysicists conducted non-invasive ground-penetrating radar scans near the same coordinates. They discovered what appeared to be a 100-meter-long anomaly, metallic, entombed 40 meters below ground. The readings showed an unusually high density consistent with armored plating. More disturbingly, the instruments recorded rhythmic vibrations every 88 seconds, identical to the timing reported by Soviet seismic sensors decades earlier. The data was published, then retracted within days after government intervention. Officials claimed a calibration error. The scientists were advised not to comment publicly. Unreleased testimony from one team member, obtained anonymously by a Polish historian, tells another story. He described approaching the site perimeter days after the survey and noticing faint static interference on his radio, followed by a metallic echo beneath the earth that seemed to respond to his footsteps. It was like something under there was still running, he wrote. A slow pulse, mechanical but alive. Declassified fragments from Soviet Ashfall documents lend support to that possibility. One translated page reads, "Thermal persistence suggests internal power source. Do not breach containment. Possible self-sustaining core." The remainder of the paragraph is redacted. The Soviet note appended at the bottom states, "Field engineers instructed to reseal and abandon sector." Considered unstable. In 1994, a retired Soviet geologist, Dr. Leonid Arseniev, who had worked on Ashfall, gave a brief interview before his death. He spoke of the train that burned without fire. He claimed the tunnel walls were hot to the touch, that compasses failed, and that his equipment registered magnetic inversion, a reversal of polarity consistent only with intense electromagnetic discharge. Whatever they were moving, he said, it was not gold. It was something alive, or something trying to stay alive. Historians have tried to tie these accounts to known German projects, nuclear propulsion research, biochemical storage, or attempted energy experiments. None fit precisely. The Reich's most advanced nuclear work was conducted far to the west in Haigerloch and never reached operational capability. Chemical warfare divisions possessed no such containment technology. The descriptions from Ashfall align with no known weapon of the period. The mystery deepens with a fragment of an Allied intelligence brief from 1946, labelled Captured German Technical Correspondence, Linz Sector. Among the typed pages, one bears a handwritten note in English. AE12 storage incompatible with Reese humidity. Relocate via rail 977. Analysts reviewing it decades later noted the same AE12 codename that appeared in Operation Eclipse. The document suggests that the Reichsbank train may have been carrying the same unknown cargo that vanished near Prague just days later. If true, the WWII tunnels may conceal not treasure, but the missing counterpart of AE12, an artifact of power or technology transported in those final days as the Reich collapsed. The repetition of the 88-second pulse across multiple decades and nations is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Modern sensors continue to record intermittent tremors in the WWII region, localized exclusively within the tunnel coordinates, though no seismic fault exists. The frequency remains constant. Local residents speak of livestock refusing to approach certain areas, of compasses spinning erratically, and of faint metallic sounds at night after rainfall. Official surveys attribute these to groundwater resonance, but the documents paint a darker possibility, that Project Ashfall was not an investigation but a burial. The Soviets may have realized what was entombed beneath the Owl Mountains and sealed it deliberately. One GRU annotation, half-burned but legible, reads, "If containment fails, there will be no witnesses. Let it sleep." And so, under the quiet hills of Silesia, where the forests have grown thick over abandoned mines, a forgotten train may still rest, its cargo humming faintly, measured every 88 seconds, marking time for a nation that no longer exists. Chapter 5. The Iron Curtain Tapes. SIGINT. 37 Redline. In January 1968, deep within the Arctic forest near Arkhangelsk, a Soviet signals intelligence outpost designated Station Sever 3 has detected an anomaly on the shortwave spectrum. It was faint but persistent, a series of rhythmic, looping transmissions operating at 1984 MHz. At first, technicians assumed it to be atmospheric interference, the sort caused by solar flares or aurora reflection. But when they filtered the noise, a clear signal emerged. The voice on the recording spoke German, more precisely, pre-war German, a dialect used by military operators of the late 1930s. The transmission repeated a single phrase: Einheit aktiv, wir sind nicht tot. Unit active, we are not dead. The intercept was filed as SIGINT 37 and Redline. Initial analysis suggested it originated somewhere near the Estonian border. The Soviets triangulated the signal to a stretch of forest outside Narva, an area known to contain the ruins of an abandoned Luftwaffe communications station. Field teams were dispatched in February under orders from the 2nd Directorate of the KGB. Their report, later classified State Secret, described discovering a series of steel masts protruding through the snow and the remains of a reinforced concrete bunker, its entrance sealed with welded plates bearing Nazi insignia. The welds had been cut open recently, too clean, too modern for wartime craftsmanship. Someone else had been there first. Inside, the bunker appeared untouched since 1945. The floors were covered in frost, the air dry and metallic. Rows of vacuum tube transmitters still stood against the walls, their glass valves intact, their power leads connected to corroded conduits. What astonished investigators was that several machines were still operating, oscillating, glowing dimly, their filaments powered by a source that engineers could not identify. The generators had long since ceased, yet the devices emitted faint warmth. On one table lay a reel-to-reel tape recorder spinning slowly, feeding empty tape through its heads. When the investigators stopped the machine, the room fell silent. Moments later, one of the transmitters switched itself back on. The recovered tapes were flown to Moscow for analysis at the Ministry of Communications. Acoustic spectrograms revealed layered frequencies beyond the human voice, pulses and bursts resembling Morse but modulated in irregular intervals. When transcribed, the embedded code spelled fragments of German words. Erinnerung, Phase 2, Untersee. The final segment corresponded to a date, Noxwait 1925. Analysts concluded it was an elaborate hoax or test transmission left by retreating German forces. Yet no known records mention any such broadcast or encoded beacon. The KGB sealed the site, covering the entrance with explosives. Officially, Station Sever 3 was ordered to delete all references to Redline. But 2 technicians copied segments of the recording onto personal cassettes before destruction. These cassettes surfaced in the 1990s, smuggled out of Russia following the collapse of the Soviet Union. One reached a sound engineer in Berlin who digitized the recording. When played through a modern analyzer, the transmission revealed harmonics outside normal broadcast range, subsonic tones forming patterns akin to heartbeat intervals. The engineer described the sound as alive. Declassified NATO archives from the 1970s confirm that Western intelligence was aware of the transmissions long before the Soviet discovery. A memorandum from the British Signals Branch dated 1972 references persistent long-wave emissions in the 20 MHz band, exhibiting pre-war German linguistic structures. MI6 codenamed it Ghost Line. American analysts at Fort Meade cross-referenced it with similar anomalies, captured by a naval listening post in Norway. The same phrase was detected, though in fragmented form, Weihe, nicht, tot. The source always traced back to the same radius near Narva. In 1973, a NATO Special Operations Unit disguised as civilian researchers entered Estonia to locate the bunker. Their mission logs, recovered only decades later, describe finding the same underground complex already resealed by concrete. Inside the entrance tunnel, they reported walls that vibrated faintly under touch and instruments that failed without apparent cause. One entry by a radio officer reads, "The static follows us even with power off. It isn't just interference, it's responding." The unit withdrew after 48 hours. 2 members failed to report symptoms consistent with radiation exposure: nausea, dizziness, bleeding gums, though no radioactive sources were found. For years, the Redline tapes circulated among intelligence circles as myth. Most believed them to be remnants of wartime experiments in automated communication, perhaps linked to Project Eisenwind or Operation Deep Current. But others saw continuity. The same 88-second interval found in Baltic sonar recordings appeared faintly in the Redline signal. The possibility that the transmissions originated from below the sea, rather than from land, could not be dismissed. A declassified CIA brief from 1981, titled Project Redline Evaluation, mentions cross-spectrum anomalies between Soviet and NATO intercepts, noting that multiple stations, including naval, atmospheric, and deep radar, exhibit synchronized bursts consistent with a repeating coded pulse. The conclusion reads, "Phenomenon likely residual automatic transmission loop from WWII era installations. Continue monitoring. Do not engage source." In 1991, during the political collapse of the Soviet Union, a small group of independent researchers gained temporary access to abandoned military archives in Pskov. Among the files was a single reel labeled SIGINT 37, original recording. The team played it once before the equipment failed. The surviving account describes a male voice speaking in perfect, emotionless cadence, repeating, "This is Einheit. 400, we are awake." The connection to the mysterious unit, 400 discovered in Königsberg years earlier, was impossible to ignore. The recording was later confiscated by the FSB. The researchers were instructed to forget what they had heard. One of them, an Estonian linguist named Alexei Vosu, later claimed that the voice on the tape paused between words, as if waiting for a reply. He spent the rest of his life studying residual shortwave noise in the Narva region. Shortly before his death in 2007, Vosu recorded a final broadcast from the same frequency, weaker than before but unmistakable. The last audible words: Phase 2 abgeschlossen. Warten auf Befehl. Phase 2 complete. Awaiting orders. No one could explain how equipment inactive for over 6 decades could transmit again. The Narva site was investigated one final time by a joint European research team in 2012. They found nothing but rusted debris and ice. Yet geophysical sensors picked up a persistent electromagnetic pulse emanating from below ground, repeating every 88 seconds, faint but regular, like a heartbeat under frozen earth. Today, the Redline tapes remain stored in multiple national archives under restricted classification. Attempts to publicly release them are blocked under national security exceptions. Unverified copies occasionally surface online, often accompanied by corrupted audio files said to contain the same signal. Analysts who have listened to the full unedited transmission describe auditory distortion and physical unease, as if the air itself vibrates. In every case, the transmission ends abruptly after 6 minutes with a final burst of Morse code. Wir sind nicht tot. Whether the broadcasts originate from leftover German technology, Cold War experimentation, or something older buried beneath the borderlands, no one can say. But the pattern persists. Every August 6th, precisely at 23:47 Moscow time, the signal returns, unchanged, undiminished, and untraceable. And every time, amid the static and the hum, the same voice cuts through, mechanical, distant, and certain. We are not dead. In the end, every thread, AE-12, the vanished convoy, the burning train beneath Silesia, the whispering frequencies of Redline, converges into the same unanswered pattern: persistence without presence. Files close, witnesses die, and nations change, yet the signals endure. Whether mechanical ghosts, residual energy, or deliberate transmission from something entombed, no one can tell. But one truth bleeds through every recovered document and decrypted code. Whatever the Reich tried to hide, it never truly stopped. Somewhere beneath the silence of forests and mountains, machinery still hums, untouched since 1945, waiting for a command that history itself forgot to cancel.